Hey, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. One more time, welcome. Thank you for joining our second ever Moral Ambition talk. My name is Julia van Boven, and I am a co-founder and community director at the School for Moral Ambition. And I am incredibly excited to welcome you to this session. Let me briefly introduce the Moral Ambition talks and why we do this. We do this because we want to share the stories of people who we consider morally ambitious and who we see as examples of how you could use your career to do a lot of good in this world. We already had a first one in Q1 with Nick Verstegen, CEO of Goal3, an organization active in global health. This time we have Susi Snyder, more about her later. And we will have a third one in our first pilot sequence. And this might even be you or someone you nominate. Why do we do this? Because we are building a global community of ambitious idealists like yourself, with now over 10,000 members from more than 100 countries across the globe. And we find that many people are looking for the way they can maximize their impact. And within our circle program, the way we are organized in this community is through moral ambition circles. We distinguish 5 ways of making an impact. Here you see them on the screen. It can be by having a high impact career, by joining or starting a high impact organization. Donating parts of your money to highly effective charities is the second option. Doing volunteering work, building a movement, for example, by starting your moral ambition circle, or making the change happen from within your current organization. Well, of course, it is quite obvious today that Susi falls within category 1. She dedicated at least already 30 years of her career trying to make a change and preventing nuclear war from happening. A very serious topic which requires a lot of significant attention. And what I found really cool about meeting Susi is the first time I met her, I expected a very serious woman, because if you've been working on a topic like this for already 30 years, I cannot imagine how you can still be fun and highly energetic. But everything I had in mind was untrue. Susi was one of the most vibrant, enthusiastic persons I've ever met. And I am super grateful that she is our guest for the second Moral Ambition Talks today. Well, why did we invite Susi? Well, I think I already explained, because of her career, because of her energy, and I am very sure that she can inspire you to take more action as well. But as you know, within our community, we work from a framework called the Triple S framework to identify what are the biggest problems in our time. And while inviting Susi to share her story with you, we had to talk, of course, as well. How does her problem, preventing nuclear war from happening, fit this Triple S framework? How is this problem sizable, sorely overlooked, and also solvable? Well, the answer may be straightforward, but just one nuclear bomb can kill millions of people, making it extremely sizable. Also, it is still sorely overlooked because there are so limited number of people working on it. And also there is such a limited amount of funding going into this important work. And when I asked Susi, is this problem actually even solvable? Her answer was super clear. Yes, Julia, there is only 9 men that need to be in the room to solve this problem forever. And I think that message is very hopeful and also shares how Susi is someone who takes action and really has a clear image of the solution she is working towards. So I think that's all I have to say for now. I'm going to invite Susi to share her talk, and this will take about 20 minutes. And after that, there will be lots of space for you to ask your questions to Susi. So without further ado, Susi, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Julia. I feel properly, eulogized. I feel properly commended. I feel overwhelmingly encouraged and welcomed to be here. And it's great to join all of you today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this Moral Ambition series and for thinking about this really interesting question. What can I do? And it's a question I think we all ask ourselves at some point in our lives. And for a lot of us, we probably ask ourselves the question frequently, more than one point in our lives. I work on nuclear weapons, and nuclear weapons are a massive, massive problem. Nuclear weapons are not the problem you want to be talking about at dinner parties for the most part. Sometimes, but pretty soon people at a cocktail party will just sort of stray off. Like, oh, nuclear weapons, yes, 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 yes. But that's because nuclear weapons are scary. They're big, dumb, clumsy bombs that are designed to destroy cities. That's what they are designed for. Nuclear weapons, they're disproportionate. You can never use them in warfare, not legally. We have the Geneva Conventions for reasons, and using nuclear weapons would violate them. They're outrageously expensive, these weapons, so crazy expensive. I mean, last year, the nuclear armed states spent more than $3,000 a second on these bombs. Crazy expensive. And what we've learned through history, because these weapons have been around for 80 years now, and what we've learned is that the countries who have them start to deny democracy within their own countries. They start hiding information. Things are kept secret from the public. Nuclear weapons are not democratic. They don't promote an inclusive society. And they're big, dumb, clumsy bombs designed to blow up cities, right? Nuclear weapons are nuts, as a friend of mine used to say. But it's a kind of a weird subject for a girl who grew up in New York City to get involved in. So let me tell you what got me sucked into this issue, because that's a story I hope you like, and it's a story I hope you can share. In August of 1945, the United States dropped the second nuclear bomb over the city of Nagasaki. And there was a man named Sumitere Taniguchi who was 16 years old. He was riding his bike. He was a postman. He was riding his bike, delivering letters, because even the mail continues through war. And he was riding his bike about 3.5 kilometers from the epicenter of the bomb, where the bomb went off. Sumitere Taniguchi was thrown from his bicycle. His back was burned in that fireball that some people equate to the heat of 10,000 suns. Sumitere Taniguchi survived. Somehow he survived. And at a random conference in New Mexico in the 90s, I was in a classroom listening to Sumitere Taniguchi tell his story. And this was an older Japanese man. I mean, it was the 90s. He was like, he was an old, I didn't know a lot of people from Japan. Again, didn't. And this man, very, very proper, very, very formal man, stood up at the end of his talk. He stood up after explaining how far away he was from the epicenter of that blast. And he stood up in this classroom in front of a few hundred people, and he lifted his shirt. This is not what you expect from a very proper Japanese man sitting in front of or standing in front of a group of strangers. But he lifted his shirt, and from across the room, I could see his heart beating. And I could see it through his chest, because as he had just explained to us, he spent almost a year lying on his stomach, face down, to recover from the burns across his back. And that forced his rib cage to sort of bend inward, so that across a classroom, I could see his heart. And my heart went out to him. And I thought, this man, he's standing here, what courage he has to share this, what power he has to make this classroom full of people take a deep, gasping breath and go, oh, and question our own eyes. Is this real? To question everything we knew. How is this possible? How could he survive? And yet he did. He told his story, and he told his story as a warning. He said, so many others that I knew didn't survive. Little kids, their parents, school children, These bombs do not discriminate. And I was moved. And I said, okay, if he can be brave enough to stand in front of this room full of people and lift his shirt and show us his heart, I can do something. I have to do something. How could I not do something? This was the worst problem I had ever really thought about at that moment. I mean, I was learning, this is the stuff that you use to make nuclear bombs. That stuff stays toxic for thousands of generations. This is a contamination that leaves a legacy of harm, but it's totally preventable. So my heart went out to Sumitari Taniguchi in that moment. And for the last 30 years, I've been working on this issue, thinking about that, thinking about his beating heart across a room and how I should do something and could do something. And nuclear weapons, I mean, the last time they were used in war was in 1945. Like, they seem, to be honest, they seem kind of dumb, right? They're big, they're dumb, they're clumsy bombs. So why? Why have them? Why continue with them? Why not do something and see if I could add my skills to help make a difference? Because I am not somebody who usually kind of works on nuclear weapons issues. I studied computer programming and business administration. I am not an international relations theory specialist. I'm not a political scientist. I'm somebody who knows how to read an audit and do accounts management and manage bookkeeping. I love accounting. It's like crazy. I am somebody who can figure out computer code just looking at it, go, hey, here's the problems. This is not the skill set that I encountered in others who were working on this issue. Everybody I talked to was a specialist in law, was a specialist in international relations and politics. But wait, I could bring something into this. So let me try. And everything I continue to learn has helped me understand that when it comes to this particular problem, every single person has something they could do. And that's kind of neat. I have to say, there's not a lot of great problems in the world where you really feel like you can make a difference. But when it comes to nuclear weapons, the problem is what we understand and the stories that we are told and forget to question about these big, dumb, clumsy bombs. And that's part of the problem and why we haven't finished getting rid of nuclear weapons yet. Because I will tell you this, I'm not going to take credit for it, but when I started working on this issue, there are about 40,000 nuclear weapons in the world. And today, there are a little over 12,000. I did not dismantle all of those bombs. However, I am confident that I've helped people understand the value in dismantling those bombs, understand that we don't need these weapons and we can find alternative ways to reinforce and create a collective security. There's another way forward. But as Julia mentioned when we started, there are 9 guys who have control over nuclear weapons. They also have a massive industry and infrastructure around them. There is a huge industrial complex built to support the billion-dollar nuclear weapons industry. I know, because I research it and I write about it and I talk to people about it. There are all these companies who pay lobbyists, who fund think tanks to say the solution to our problems is nuclear weapons. The genie is out of the bottle. We could never put it back in. So we have to keep these weapons as long as they exist, which is a bit of a logical fallacy. And that's why I know we will win. Because if you start to pick apart the arguments around nuclear weapons, around why we have nuclear weapons, they start to crumble. We have them because others have them. Okay, so if everybody just sits together and says we won't have them anymore, we can do that? Yes, but nobody will ever sit down with us. But if countries agree that they're not useful, or if they can't be used within the confines of international humanitarian law, the laws of war, what are they for? Well, no, we're never actually going to use them. They're for deterrence. They're to deter other countries from attacking us. Well, but the countries that have nuclear weapons, they seem to get attacked a lot. In fact, most of them have been in one war or another since they got nuclear weapons. How does that work? Oh, no. They're not to deter actual attacks. Every conversation you have, and this is part of the problem, every conversation you have with some decision makers about this who want to keep the weapons, they will try to move the goalposts, to shift their excuse. But the sands shift and they are not firm. The stories they tell are not firm. The stories that are firm, the stories that break through, are the stories of the beating heart. They're the stories of the survivors. They're the stories of what nuclear weapons do. They're the scientific analysis that show if a small number, half of the arsenal of India and Pakistan, were used, it would cause a global famine, putting 2 billion lives at risk. The stories and the evidence show that where nuclear weapons have been tested in the surrounding communities, the ones who have been hurt the most have been little girls because of the disproportionate impact of ionizing radiation. So these big, dumb, clumsy bombs are designed to incinerate cities, and they hurt little girls the worst. And part of the challenge in dealing with these weapons is helping people who make decisions around these weapons hear that side of the story. It's breaking through the noise. It's putting some firmament under the shifting sands. And it's getting people who don't really think about the topic all that much to start talking about it. That is why I know it's a problem that we can solve. In my lifetime, I've seen the numbers go down. In my life, I have been part of creating an international treaty supported by more than half the countries of the world, making everything to do with these weapons completely illegal. Now, that hasn't quite got those who have the weapons to give them up yet, but it is creating an incredible environment that allows them to change their minds about these bombs, that gives them a face-saving way to shift their own decision-making. It's part of this story where we knew there were 30 countries that tried to make nuclear weapons, were on the way, and changed that plan. So part of my work is helping these decision makers see there is an alternative, and it is okay to change their mind. And changing your mind is scary. We've all been in situations where we've been confronted with facts that now we have to change our long-held opinions about something, whether it be, what you eat, what you drink, how much coffee you have in a day, all of these things. We've been confronted with that, and it's not so fun to have to make those changes. So part of knowing that we can solve this problem is making sure that we create and we build the space for those who need to change their mind to be able to do so. And we've seen this have effect. And that effect comes from the ability to imagine what the world looks like without nuclear weapons. I imagine it all the time. It's what keeps me going. I imagine a world where unfortunately there's still war. I imagine a world where unfortunately there are strongman dictators doing horrible things to their citizens. I imagine a world where 9 men do not have the power to destroy everything I love in 30 minutes or less. I imagine a world where the $3,000 a second spent on nuclear weapons is actually being invested in climate change mitigation, or schools, or infrastructure, fixing some crumbling bridges. I imagine a world where the science and the scientists that are involved in nuclear weapons work now get to work on other things. These are rocket scientists. These guys, they are brilliant people. And I imagine a world where they get to use their brilliance for the benefit of all of us. I imagine a world in which instead of building missiles that can strike a target fiercer and faster, they are building space exploration possibilities. I imagine a world where we have flying cars. I imagine this world where, yeah, I'm still going to fight with my sister, but I'm never going to have to worry about her city being incinerated or our nieces dying because they happened to be girls and a nuclear weapon was used. That threat is off the table in the world that I am imagining. I'm imagining that this is possible. I know it is possible. But to get there, we have to do something, right? And we all have something we can do, and it's going to be different. And that is one of the coolest things about working on these issues. Everybody can contribute, whether that means you go out and you make good trouble, or if you just make some noise, talk to some other people, share stuff on social media, let people know this is a problem that's still out there, but there's a way we can fix it. Everything that people do around this issue, around all of the issues that we care about, it does matter. We do not know what it will be that finally changes the minds of those leaders whose minds need to change. Will they have seen something on TV? Will they have witnessed a protest in front of where they work? John F. Kennedy said he signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty because of the women with baby carriages parading in front of the White House, calling for an end to above ground nuclear testing. Said, it's the women, I have to do it. We don't know what makes the change happen. We do know that every single conversation counts. And part of what I do is I live my life in a way, and I hope you can think about this also, where it doesn't matter what your background is or what your ambitions are or where you might be going or where you sit today. My conversation with you about this issue, about whatever we talk about, is significant and powerful, because my conversation with you today might lead to you having a conversation with somebody else tomorrow, and another conversation beyond that, and another conversation beyond that. We are the positive mushrooming of social change. That is how it happens. So that's what I ask for you today, is think about this. Think about a massive problem. Think about what moves your own beating heart. And think about the conversation that you are going to take from this and where you go with it. If you're really into it and you are inspired to come and join us at ICAN, you're absolutely welcome. We love all people to come and hang out with. And all we ask is that you believe it is possible to end this problem. I believe it. I hope you do too. And thank you so much for your time today. I'm looking forward to where we go from here.
Wow. Susie, everyone, can you please switch on your sound and give her a big applause?
I'm smiling ear to ear. I feel just like so inspired right now.
Me too. Wow. Susie, really, it was an incredible talk. I'm almost emotional about it, like the way you imagine the world to be. And well, I would love to sign for your vision and really contribute in any way that I can. I can imagine all of you listeners also need some time to let it sink in. Take a moment. I need a moment, actually. But also, I can imagine there must be so many people eager to ask their questions to you, Susie.
Well, let me tell you, Julia, I've been working this issue for decades. And every time I talk to somebody who is coming into it for the first time, I also get really emotional. When I talk to people who have survived nuclear testing or nuclear weapons, the use of nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I can't hold it back. I kind of wish I could, because I get sort of weepy and it could be embarrassing. Like, I've had these conversations in the UN and all of a sudden I'm like, excuse me, and I run off to the washroom, like, to wash my face and stuff. I remember one time having a conversation. It was the first conference that had ever taken place on the humanitarian impact of the use of nuclear weapons, and Norway organized it in 2013. And it was the coolest thing because, oh my gosh, never had this been talked about before. And of course, you know, I'm a human being. I drink too much coffee. I'm in the washroom and I hear somebody crying. And I go over and I talk to them. It was an ambassador from a country where that has a policy that includes the possible use of nuclear weapons in their policy, their national policy, not their own, but to borrow from somebody else's. And she said, I didn't know that's what it meant when these got used. And so we sat there and we had a moment. So everybody take a moment. It's a big deal issue. It's an issue that we don't give ourselves time to think about. And it's important that we do, because it can also stress you out. Like, Minna's excellent reminding us, take a breath and take it from there. And let's hear some questions.
Maybe while everyone can think of their question, it's also interesting to know, Susie, that we had a poll about how much are people involved in nuclear disarmament. And out of 60 voters, 73% is not at all involved. 20%, so 12 people are following the news. And there are also 3 people consider working in this field. And we have 1 colleague of yours present. So many people must feel like I, hearing many of this for the first time. But now I would love to invite you, if you have a question, to please raise your digital hand so I can give you the opportunity to ask your question to Susie. I think everyone is still silent.
Well, let me say something. You know, like, there's for those who would consider working in this field. If you're interested, find somebody who's working in it and ask them, what do they need? And honestly, most of the people who are working in this field, they got into it not kind of as a straightforward career path. I did not have a straightforward career path. I started on Wall Street and then bunked out of that when I realized that people were grossly unhappy. But they didn't have a straightforward path. What they had a connection to the issue, and they started to go to events. They started to meet different people, and they started to help out, doing very small things. It is amazing how just 1 hour every month of I can help you out by, making calls or doing, I can put up posters. I can do something. I can come to a talk. I can arrange a talk. All of those things really make a difference. And that's how the ladder in, let's say, start climbing the ladder in, so to speak. There are some who do go straight through the path and they wind up in a lot of think tanks. And that's great. And there are more and more programs within universities that are starting to look at these questions. But for a long time, there haven't been. So it's really good. And if you're connected to universities, it's always good to ask, is this something we teach? Is this something we talk about? And if you don't, I can put you in contact with really cool professors that look at things, whether it be statistical representation of data visualization, right? Which is a big thing. Like, when you talk about, big numbers and stuff, what does it mean? What does a billion mean? It's confusing sometimes. Or if you talk about, to be honest, or if you talk about, if you look at international relations, this comes up, the challenges around nuclear deterrence theory, the challenges around democracy and nuclear weapons, really interesting stuff. And there's a broad path of critical scholarship that is opening and expanding in a way that we haven't seen. in the last, just in the last 5-10 years, we've seen a big expansion of that. So there are lots of different pathways. And if you want to find work, find somebody local who is working on it. Go start local, start where you are, because I guarantee we are an international campaign coalition with 700 partners in 110 countries. There is somebody near you who has a connection to this issue or something similar, and they would love to hear from you. Well, now I'll come back. I'm sure there are other questions.
Thank you, Susie. And it's so amazing to give us such detailed instructions on how we could get started. I see a hand from Kristen, but first I saw a hand from Pedro. So I would love to ask Pedro if you still have the question or if it has been answered already.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Susie. Thanks for the chat. That was really inspiring. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the biggest risk of actual nuclear weapon use? Obviously, that was the recent tension between India and Pakistan. That was really concerning. It seemed in that situation that things could escalate very quickly and quite quickly get out of hand in that sense. But it still feels somewhat implausible that someone would get to that extent. But then again, we're seeing things that we didn't used to see. We're normalizing famine, we're normalizing mass murder of civilians, we're normalizing the dehumanization of people that are supposedly enemies. And of course, I'm referring to Gaza in particular, which is really concerning when you think about what leads people to kind of just press a trigger that kills a lot of people, right? That's really concerning. But are there any specific situations that concern you the most? Obviously, in Pakistan for me are sort of a glaring one, but there's also sort of talk about from a lot of governments about using sort of tactical nuclear weapons, so that it's sort of smaller in size. Is that a concern? What concerns you the most? Because obviously we all grow up with knowing that nuclear weapons is a massive issue, but we also grow thinking that it's really implausible that these will be applied. So,
which is a much nicer way to live. Like, oh, it's not likely, so I don't have to worry too much about it, because it's scary. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, the spike in searches of will I die in a nuclear war was overwhelming, because that's what people are starting to think about. To be perfectly honest with you, I worry more about accidents, about an accidental launch, or about a country that misinterprets data. So, for example, in 1983, Norway launched a weather balloon. And the Soviet Union at the time thought it was an incoming intercontinental ballistic missile from the United States. And they were completely convinced that's what it was. That's what it had shown on the radar systems. And a man named Stanislav Petrov decided that he was not going to follow orders, not going to alert his commander, and not going to fire their arsenal of missiles back to the US, which is what the practice would have required.
Yeah.
That man saved the world. And he saved the world from an accident. And his life was ruined for it because he did not follow orders, and you do not do that. In the military, your job is follow orders. My worry is about the accidents. My worry is that the application of artificial intelligence and advanced machine learning on data analysis for incoming situations would be incorrect in a place that we cannot identify, and we think that something is happening that is not happening. And with nuclear weapons, the policy has been always use it or lose it. And that there's the firing of missiles in response to the suspicion of an incoming missile. That is one of my huge fears. I'm also, to be perfectly honest, like about 12 years ago, in the North Atlantic, a French nuclear-armed submarine and a British nuclear-armed submarine bumped into each other. Like, okay, granted, their job is to be invisible under the sea, but holy moly, like that could have gone really bad, right? Really bad. There's a man, Eric Schlosser, who wrote a book called Command and Control, and it's 1,500 pages. It's a massive book, but it's all about the accidents and the near misses we've had with nuclear weapons. That is what I'm afraid of. The situation with India and Pakistan, terrifying. The potential for escalation, terrifying. The good folks at Princeton put together this virtual reality scenario where you could put on a headset and you could be in charge of making the decision, do you fire a nuke or not? And every single time, people fired because the pressure to do so is overwhelming. And any leader, we underestimate the pressures on leaders who have to make the decision. We underestimate the impact of the fog of war. We underestimate and we hope for people to make good decisions. And I don't always make good decisions. I don't know about you all, if you always make good decisions. Luckily, I'm not in charge of that, but we're humans. These are humans. And we have to take this option off the table. And the accidents are what gets me. And just one thing on the issue of the tactical nuclear weapon, it's called that not because it's smaller or less harmful. It's called that because initially the idea was you put a bunch of these in Europe and they'll stop an advancing Soviet line. And they were like, those are the nuclear bombs that are stationed in Europe, meant to be used in Europe. And they're not less powerful. They're just deployed differently than what we see on the intercontinental ballistic missiles or the submarine launched ballistic missiles. And that is me saying the word missiles way too many times. So let's go to a next question. Thank you so much, Pedro, for
Thank
what
you.
you asked.
Possibly terrified now. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
It is impressive, Susie, how you can say these super scary things with a smile. It's yeah, but it's your work. Yeah, you're deep into it. And thank you for saying it so clearly, like makes it really understandable for all. Great question, Pedro. Moving over to Kristen.
Hi, Susie. Thanks for the talk. I guess my question's not as serious, but after you spoke about how it's just like accidental that people could do these things, I find it hilariously disturbing because it doesn't make me scared, but it should. And I don't know why. I think it's probably just the fact that we watched too many Simpsons episodes growing up. So we're like not really scared of these things. But sorry, just to go to my question. So I'm from South Africa and we don't have any nuclear weapons. I think that happened in the 90s. So what would you say that I can say to my friends and to get people interested in nuclear weapons and stuff like that? What would I say to them knowing that we don't have these weapons in our country? And then my second question, if you have time, is just as a morally ambitious person, how did you come to terms with this is the path that you want to follow? I know you mentioned climate change and gender issues as well, but how is it that you are okay with this being the thing that you're going to do?
Cool. Thank you. Great questions. First off, South Africa is amazing. I mean, it's a beautiful place that you live aside from that. But it's one of the only countries that fully dismantled its nuclear weapons program under the watch of the international community. And so they had nuclear weapons and in the 90s said no more and got rid of it. And it is totally verified. It showed everybody in the world, this is possible. Like South Africa is so cool. South Africa is leading and going to be president of the review conference on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. South Africa is a disarmament champion in the world. So, you know, that's one thing I would think about and talk about. Like South Africa chose an alternate path and showed that it is possible. South Africa led the charge for creating in Africa a continental nuclear weapon free zone. Like that is so cool. And it shows that the alternatives and the benefit of those alternatives, better diplomatic standing in the world community by far, like real access to leadership and a moral authority that others cannot claim. So that's what I would talk about when it comes to South Africa. And also there are some really interesting kind of organizations within South Africa working around all sorts of different disarmament and arms control issues. And so if you want to get in touch, I think that my contact information is going to get shared after this. But you know, if you're looking to get in touch with people, happy to put you in touch. There's really cool stuff that's going on and thinking about what are the possibilities and where to go. But when it comes to me, I'll answer your second question, why nuclear weapons and not other things? I feel like this is a big, messy, horrible problem that is so easily fixable that I wanted to fix this one first and then go do the rest. And so I'm still working on fixing it first. Like the first ever campaign I worked on nuclear issues, we stopped the building of a nuclear waste dump, and we won. So I kind of keep figuring we'll win this, and then I can go do other stuff. And so I have like huge plans. I'm not done yet. I still have time before I retire. Fix this, then fix other things. Just because this one, I've met too many people who've either been forcibly displaced, who have been, impacted themselves, their family by this weapon that is so preventable. It captured me. Like I said, Sumitari Taniguchi's heart captured me. This woman I met in Nevada, and it was Kristen. She became a kindergarten, a school teacher, because she wanted to have kids, but she was exposed as a child to a nuclear test gone bad in Nevada, and she couldn't. She had 17 miscarriages, so she could never have children herself. So she's a school teacher, and I think about her story, and like, oh my gosh, how that could have been prevented, and how can I prevent other harm? And I love the idea of preventing problems instead of, because we're going to have to clean up the problems from nuclear weapons, but preventing more was a really good idea. So that's a little bit. Everybody's got something they connect to, and this just happens to be my thing. I swear I am good fun at dinner parties, though.
Those are great answers. Thank you.
They are indeed. Really, wow. Olga, I think you were next.
Oh, okay. Hi from Germany. I'm originally from Moldova, so the Russian-Ukrainian war really is close to my heart. Yeah. And also some impact. So I have two questions. One stems from the Russian-Ukrainian war. And actually it's a big question because Susie, you said the armament, the nuclear armament is a solvable question. Actually, it's a solvable problem. Yeah. And it depends on a really low number of people. Right? Yet, these are people that are really difficult to deal with, right? And currently
nice
involved in a lot of
there,
wars.
Olga.
Yeah, yeah, mildly, yeah, very, very mildly putting it. So I see it as a prisoner's dilemma, right? Either we all cooperate and then we are all disarmed, or if there is someone who has an arsenal left, then the others would fear and would act on the potential knowledge. So it's really like a prisoner's dilemma. And I feel that this is not only the case in the nuclear armament, but also it's a case in another topic that is close to my heart, like tax fairness, yeah, and progressive taxation and so on. So again, because we are so globalized, and unless everyone understands and cooperates and makes up a system which is fair in terms of taxation, then we'd have companies shifting to countries that are not cooperating, that offer tax havens and so on. So the problem would still persist, right? So the question, yeah, now getting to the question. Is there do you have some idea, maybe some, framework that would kind of move us forward in this prisoner's dilemma and shift us towards more cooperation? If you can answer it. I don't know how publicly you can answer whether I have a strategy, I have a framework, yeah, that would solve all humanity problems. But maybe some insights there. And the second question, if we have time, I see Steve also wants to ask one. So yeah, let's see if there is time for it.
So actually there is a plan, right, on this. And the thing is, it's not, with every good plan, it never quite works out the way you think it's going to work out, right? So right now we have this there's two international treaties that are like massively impactful when it comes to governing nuclear weapons. One is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that went into effect a little more than 55 years ago, 1970. And it went into effect, and what it does is it says 5 countries who tested nuclear bombs before 1967 have to get rid of them, and nobody else is allowed to get them. That's the basic agreement. And everybody can have nuclear technology as long as it's regulated and doesn't get diverted to military use. that treaty has worked surprisingly well, right? I mean, it took a long time for like France and China to get on board, but they did. And so the system of international law and also the system of verification, inspections that goes around it has been truly impactful in keeping the numbers down. But like I said, we haven't gotten rid of the weapons that there are, not fully. I mean, South Africa disarmed. The weapons that were stationed in former Soviet republics were returned and dismantled, and a lot of them went to power the southeast of the US, but that's another story for another time. And we haven't quite got there. So what we need to do, what countries decided to do, about 130 of them, is negotiate a new treaty that just evens the playing field, making nuclear weapons illegal for everyone. Nobody can get them, and if you have them, you can join up either after you disarm your weapons, or you join up and then you get a decade to disarm them, and extensions are possible, right? Like with chemical weapons, you can negotiate an extension to the deadline. And so that system is creating pressure and giving a space and an opportunity for those who have them to come in to that family, if you will, of nations. It is terrifying to the countries who have nuclear weapons. They are so afraid of this treaty. And it doesn't sound like it, because they're like, well, we have nuclear bombs, so why would we be afraid of anything? Except they're so afraid that they have launched these massive diplomatic initiatives to try to get the negotiations stopped. They failed. To try to get the entry into force of this treaty stopped. There are nuclear armed countries that threatened aid assistance for others if they signed on to this treaty, and the countries signed on anyway, calling their bluff. They haven't been able to stop this. And it is unbalancing that, what has been in place. So yeah, it does require some attention. It requires an adherence to international law, but adherence to international law is not something that happens, in a vacuum. It happens with inspections. It happens with other countries paying close attention and sending people in to check and verify, because as Reagan said, you can trust, but you have to verify. And so there are verification mechanisms to make sure that those arsenals, once dismantled. Now, there is a choice that needs to be made, and there are a lot of pressures coming to bear, especially right now, on those countries with nuclear weapons, because they can't afford it. And with the current war that's happening in Europe, where the money's going for defense, it is not going into defense with nuclear weapons. It is going into buying tanks. And there's only so much money that these governments have. And while they often go into extreme debt on defense issues, they have to make choices. And that's what we're seeing, a tremendous pressure in the UK in particular. It's going to be social services or a new nuclear weapon system. And people want something to defend, right? Like, we need something to defend. We want something to protect. And that includes the beauty of, social welfare. It includes the beauty of the communities within which we live. Like, that is what we defend. And so we make choices that way. So it's not easy, but it is possible. And we are building and continuing to build and reinforce and strengthen the mechanisms to make sure that it is effective and that it is permanent when those decisions get made. Because I will tell you, it is impossible to hide a nuclear weapons program. You cannot build these in your backyard. And every clandestine program that has ever existed has been discovered and either is being dismantled or there are negotiations in the process to try and dismantle it. You can't hide this anymore. And so that's one of the positive things to think about. So, a lot of talking. I hope it gave you a bit of an answer.
It's super enriching to learn this from you, Susi. Thank you. Steve, I will give you the privilege of asking the last question.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Susie, for the presentation. And my question builds a little bit on where Olga was going. You know, related to the root causes of why we have nuclear weapons, right? It seems like there's tremendous political value in fear, whether it's real or perceived. You know, that political leadership needs to have an other to fear, right? And to, you know, stigmatize whatever, right? And so, you know, how are you going about addressing, you know, the root causes, real or perceived, about fear, and about, you know, the very powerful vested interests that, you know, are not only behind nuclear weapons, but, you know, your example of Ukraine and Russia suggests that, you know, money shifts away from nuclear to conventional, right? But how do you address those root causes of fear and vested interest?
That's a great question, Steve. Thank you so much. And I think, to be perfectly honest, a lot of people are afraid, and we can't ignore their fear, right? We cannot ignore that. We can question whether it is, like, we can question where it comes from. We can question, and we can provide information and connection to say, you know, do not be afraid of the migrant living next door to you, right? And do not be afraid of things happening, you know, but the fact that you are afraid, we have to acknowledge that. And what combats fear is hope, right? That is the biggest thing. It's hope, and it's connection, and it's community. And so those are the ways. What happened, the thing about all of the cultural ambassadors that worked to bring down the Iron Curtain by sharing music, dance, by doing, you know, cultural events, by having exchanges, and removed fear of the other in that process. We're currently living in a situation where the pendulum has swung in a way where fear is being ginned up in order to gain profit for vested interests, to undermine a system of regulations and norms that we have built up over decades, because we understand that it is good for us. People ask me, what is the symbol to you for hope, for future, for peace? And a part of me is a little bit cynical, but I'll tell you what, the euro and the fact that we have a common currency across so many countries, that is a symbol of interconnection. And these are countries that were at war with each other for hundreds of years. And yet the space has been made for people to change their mind, to do so in a way that they can not feel tremendous guilt and be stopped, but to come ahead. So we have to acknowledge the fear, and we have to bring to it a sense of hope and connection. And these types of talks are a great way to do so, because we are here in this community of people that is from across the planet, connecting on an issue you probably didn't expect to talk about 2 weeks ago, and hopefully being stimulated to connect with others around this and other issues. Thank you so much, Steve, for bringing that up. And I hope we can share hope and vision with others and reduce their fears.
Thank you, Susie. And for ending with this great question, Steve, really, it has been, well, inspiring, intense, enlightening to listen to you, and also to the great questions from the members in our community. I really want to thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. It was really a pleasure. I'm giving you another round of applause, and I hope everyone can spread their emotions to join me in that. I see a lot of hands. I also want to thank Minna and Marijn, who helped make this talk happen. And I want to, before we leave, also share with you how you can get more involved. Because what Susie just said, what we need, it is hope, it is connection, it is community. And I hope that in this Moral Ambition community, we can get a lot more of that by uniting all of you. So if you want to get involved, please read the book Moral Ambition from Rutger, my co-founder, if you haven't done that yet. Also, use the platform to find your collaborators. You can use the request page or just scout in the member directory, whoever is in your area. Also, you can decide to join a Moral Ambition circle and there explore what moral ambition means to you and how you can take action. And also find peers who support you in this journey. If you want to be even more involved, I invite you to start your Moral Ambition Circle. I will personally train you how to get started. And this way you do not only help yourself, but you can create space for 6 to 8 others to start finding their path on how to make the biggest impact. And of course, if you're not ready to do that yet, you're also just welcome to join our next event, which will be a talk with Rutger, and that will be taking part in July. Last thing, these talks, as said, are a pilot. This means that we only move forward if you say that it is very valuable to you. So please grab your phone, scan this QR code and share your feedback. Tomorrow you will also receive an email where you can nominate speakers for our next and final talk within this pilot. So those were all the regulatory householder ending for this meeting. I am really grateful for all of you showing up from so many different parts of the world. I would like to thank you one more time. And Susie, I would love you to say the final sentence or final word before we close this meeting.
As I said before, every conversation counts. So look forward to your next conversation and bring a piece of this one with you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.